On a cold winter night, Dr. Alejandro Garcia, a man of solid principles and unwavering passion, knelt beside a black man who was fainting on the sidewalk. Without hesitation, he used his skills to save a life. However, his act of humanity was not rewarded. Instead of receiving recognition, he was unjustly dismissed from the prestigious Central Hospital. What no one expected was that this event would trigger a series of events that would change the fate of many. Alejandro walked through the hallways of Central Hospital with the confidence of someone who knew every corner of the place. He had dedicated 10 years of his life to that hospital, earning the respect of colleagues and patients alike. His white coat fluttered slightly as he moved quickly and efficiently between the different rooms. Every morning his routine started early, reviewing the reports from the previous night and preparing his team for the scheduled surgeries. Alejandro was a middle-aged man with dark hair and some silver strands beginning to show. His eyes, always attentive and compassionate, reflected a life dedicated to serving others. He had a warm smile, but today it was absent. There was something on his mind that disturbed him deeply. That day, while reviewing reports in his office, he heard a heated conversation in the hallway. Upon stepping out, he saw a young nurse, Isabel, arguing with one of the hospital directors, Dr. Ricardo Fernandez, a man known for his haughty attitude and judgments hidden behind a facade of professionalism. "Dr. Fernandez, this patient needs to be seen immediately," said Isabel, pointing to a black man sitting in the waiting room, clearly in bad shape. "I already told you, nurse, that we don't have beds available for him," replied Fernandez disdainfully, not bothering to look at the patient. Alejandro felt a pang of indignation. He knew that excuse well. He had seen how it was used to avoid treating patients who did not fit the hospital's desired profile. "What's going on here?" interrupted Alejandro, approaching the scene. Isabel looked at Alejandro with relief. "Dr. Garcia, this man needs urgent attention. He has symptoms of a possible heart attack." Alejandro needed no more details. He approached the patient and took his pulse, confirming the severity of his condition. Without wasting a second, he ordered the assistants to prepare an emergency room. "This man needs to be treated now, Fernandez, and I won't take no for an answer," Alejandro said, looking directly into the director's eyes. Fernandez frowned, but could not object to Alejandro's firmness. While the medical team rushed to attend to the patient, Alejandro realized that this incident was just the tip of the iceberg. There was a deeper, systemic problem in the hospital, one that he could not ignore. That night, after an exhausting day, Alejandro came home and collapsed on the couch. His wife, Sofia, a woman of strong character and unconditional support, brought him a cup of tea and sat next to him. "What happened today?" asked Sofia, noticing the tension on her husband's face. Alejandro sighed and told her about the incident with the patient. "I can't keep ignoring this, Sofia. Discrimination is deeply rooted in this place. It's not just an isolated case, it's a pattern." Sofia looked at him with concern and pride at the same time. "You know I support you in everything, Alejandro, but you have to be careful. Confronting the administration won't be easy." Alejandro nodded, knowing she was right. However, his sense of justice was stronger than any fear of repercussions. He decided it was time to act, not just as a doctor but as a defender of equality and justice. The next day, Alejandro began documenting every incident of discrimination he witnessed. He spoke with colleagues who shared his concerns and started gathering evidence. He knew he couldn't do this alone and sought the support of Mariana, a local journalist known for her incisive investigations and commitment to the truth. Mariana agreed to help him without hesitation. Together, they planned to expose the hospital's discriminatory practices, trusting that the truth would come to light. Meanwhile, Alejandro continued his daily routine, but with a new determination in his heart. Every patient he treated, every life he saved, was a reminder of why he had chosen this profession and why he had to fight for change. One afternoon, as he was leaving the hospital after a long shift, Alejandro saw a man faint on the sidewalk. Without thinking twice, he ran to him and began administering first aid. It was a black man, and his condition was critical. Alejandro called for help from passers-by, and together they managed to stabilize the man until the ambulance arrived. This act of kindness did not go unnoticed. A passerby recorded the scene and uploaded it to social media, where it quickly went viral. Alejandro's story, the doctor who did not hesitate to help a stranger, spread like wildfire, attracting both support and controversy. The hospital administration quickly reacted. They feared that public attention would expose their questionable practices. They began harassing Alejandro at work, assigning him the most difficult shifts and reducing his resources. Alejandro, however, was not intimidated. With the support of Mariana and his colleagues, he continued his mission. He knew justice was on his side and that it was only a matter of time before things changed. The tension increased each day. Alejandro found himself in the eye of a hurricane, but his conviction did not waver. Determined to fight to the end for his patients, his colleagues, and all those who deserved fair and dignified treatment, each day at the hospital became a battle, not only against diseases and ailments but against a system that needed to be reformed from its foundations. And Alejandro was willing to lead that change no matter the obstacles in his way. The days following the sidewalk incident were a mix of support and adversity for Alejandro. The video going viral had made his name known beyond the hospital walls. While some praised him as a hero, others, especially in the hospital administration, saw him as a threat. Alejandro felt overwhelmed but also strengthened by the support of his colleagues and the community. Mariana, the journalist, had become a crucial ally. They spent hours talking about the injustices occurring at the hospital and how they could expose them. Mariana was determined to bring the truth to light, and Alejandro provided her with the evidence she needed. One day, while reviewing patients in the emergency room, Alejandro was called to the hospital director's office, Dr. Fernandez. Upon entering, he felt a palpable tension. Fernandez sat behind his desk with a look of disapproval. "Dr. Garcia, I've received several complaints about your recent behavior." Fernandez began in a tone that tried to be professional but did not hide his irritation. "It seems your attention has shifted from your medical duties to focusing on matters that do not concern you." Alejandro looked him straight in the eye. "My duty is to the patients, Dr. Fernandez. If I see injustices, I have the responsibility to act." Fernandez let out a heavy sigh. "This is not activism, Garcia. This is a hospital. If you can't fulfill your responsibilities adequately, we will have to take action." Alejandro left the office feeling frustrated, but more determined than ever. He knew he was doing the right thing, even if the consequences were difficult. That night, Mariana published a hard-hitting article in the local newspaper detailing the incidents of discrimination that Alejandro had documented. The reaction was immediate. The community rallied in support of Alejandro. Protests were organized outside the hospital, demanding justice and policy changes. Patients and families began sharing their own stories of discrimination, and the pressure on the administration increased. The hospital, feeling cornered, decided to retaliate. Alejandro was assigned the most exhausting night shifts and the most difficult tasks, hoping to break his spirit. But each night that passed, Alejandro only grew more resilient. His dedication to his patients never wavered, and this did not go unnoticed by those around him. One night, while Alejandro was attending to a young woman with pneumonia symptoms, he received an urgent call. A serious accident had occurred on a nearby highway, and multiple injuries were expected. Alejandro quickly prepared, coordinating the emergency team. The night became a whirlwind of frantic activity. Every bed in the emergency room was occupied, and the medical team worked tirelessly. Among the injured, Alejandro recognized one of his colleagues, Dr. Ramirez, who had been on duty that night. Ramirez was severely injured, and Alejandro felt a wave of concern. Without losing his calm, he began to stabilize his friend, working meticulously to save his life. As the night progressed, Alejandro realized that the situation was on the brink of collapse. The emergency room was saturated, and they needed more hands. He remembered Isabel, the nurse who had been one of his main allies. He called her to come and help, and she arrived without hesitation, showing the same dedication he had always admired in her. Together, Alejandro and Isabel managed to stabilize the most critical patients. The camaraderie and team spirit that formed that night were a reminder of why Alejandro had chosen to be a doctor. No matter how difficult the circumstances, there were always people willing to give their best to save lives. At dawn, as the chaos began to subside, Alejandro took a moment to breathe. Sitting in a chair in the break room, he felt the weight of the night on his shoulders. Isabel approached and put a hand on his shoulder. "We did well, Alejandro. You saved many lives today." Alejandro smiled, although the fatigue was evident on his face. "I couldn't have done it without you, Isabel." The bond between them had strengthened even more, and Alejandro knew he was not alone in this fight. But he also knew that the battle was far from over. That morning, when Alejandro finally left the hospital, he was greeted by a group of protesters who were still there supporting him. Among them, he recognized Mariana, who approached to talk to him. "The community is with you, Alejandro. You're not alone in this," Mariana said, her voice full of determination. Alejandro nodded, feeling a renewed inner strength. "Thank you, Mariana. We won't stop until there's justice." The following days were a mix of pressure and hope. Alejandro's story continued to gain media attention, and more people joined the cause. The hospital administration found itself increasingly under scrutiny, and the directors began to feel the heat of public opinion and health authorities. One afternoon, as Alejandro was preparing for another long shift, he received an unexpected call from the hospital director. Fernandez's voice sounded tenser than usual. "Dr. Garcia, we need to talk now." Alejandro knew this conversation would be crucial. He headed to Fernandez's office with a mix of anticipation and calm. Upon entering, he found not only Fernandez but several board members, all with grave expressions. "Dr. Garcia," Fernandez began, "we have decided that due to public pressure and recent circumstances, it is best for everyone that we no longer require your services." Alejandro felt a blow to his stomach but kept his composure. "If this is what you consider fair, then I accept your decision. But know that I will continue to fight for what is right, inside or outside this hospital." The director seemed uncomfortable, but Fernandez said nothing more. Alejandro left the office with his head held high, knowing his fight was far from over. Upon arriving home, he shared the news with Sofia, who hugged him tightly. "This is not the end, Alejandro. It's just the beginning of something bigger." That night, as he reviewed messages of support and planned the next steps with Mariana, Alejandro realized he had started a movement larger than he had ever imagined. He was not alone, and his determination to change the system remained intact. The following weeks were filled with intense activity. Mariana continued investigating and publishing articles that exposed the hospital's discriminatory practices. Alejandro, now unemployed, dedicated himself to organizing and participating in community talks and events, speaking about the importance of equality in healthcare. One day, he received an unexpected invitation. A hospital in a nearby city, known for its commitment to social justice, offered him a prominent position. Alejandro considered it carefully, consulting with Sofia and Mariana. Finally, he decided to accept, seeing it as an opportunity to continue fighting from a position of greater influence. As he prepared for his new position, Alejandro did not forget Central Hospital. He continued to support the protests and kept in touch with his former colleagues, who continued fighting for change from within. The community, inspired by Alejandro's bravery, continued to pressure the hospital administration. Finally, the scrutiny and public pressure led to several board members resigning. In their place, new leaders committed to equality and justice were appointed. The day Alejandro assumed his new position, he felt a mix of pride and responsibility. He knew the path would be long and full of challenges, but he also knew he was not alone. With the support of his family, colleagues, and the community, he was ready to face whatever came. Mariana, for her part, was recognized for her courageous journalism and continued to dedicate herself to exposing injustices and giving voice to the voiceless. Her work and Alejandro's left an indelible mark on the community and the healthcare system. Alejandro's commitment to justice and equality became a beacon for others, demonstrating that a determined individual can initiate significant change. And as he looked to the future, Alejandro knew that every step he took was guided by the same compassion and determination that had led him to help a man on the sidewalk that cold winter night. The days passed quickly, and the hospital where Alejandro had begun working had become a model of equality and justice. However, his heart was still with Central Hospital, where he had left behind many colleagues and patients. He maintained constant contact with Mariana, who continued reporting on the changes and difficulties at the hospital. One afternoon, while Alejandro was reviewing some reports in his new office, he received an urgent call from Isabel, the nurse who had been one of his greatest allies at Central Hospital. "Alejandro, we need your help. Several colleagues have been fired, and they're trying to silence those who still support the change. The situation is worsening." Alejandro felt a wave of concern and determination. He knew he couldn't stand by while his former colleagues fought alone. He decided to take leave from his new job and return to Central Hospital to support his comrades. When he arrived, he found the atmosphere tenser than he had imagined. The remaining directors were doing everything possible to maintain control and prevent the proposed changes from being implemented. They had fired several doctors and nurses, and those who still supported the cause were under constant surveillance. Alejandro met with Isabel and other colleagues at a cafe near the hospital. The tension on their faces was evident, but there was also a spark of hope seeing Alejandro back with them. "We can't let them intimidate us," Alejandro said firmly. "We have to keep fighting, and this time we're going to make sure they hear us." Mariana, who had also joined the meeting, nodded with determination. "I've been gathering more evidence. We have enough to take this to court if necessary, but we need more voices, more support." They decided to organize a massive protest outside the hospital, calling on the community and the media. The news spread quickly, and on the day of the protest, hundreds of people gathered to show their support. Alejandro took the microphone and began speaking with a passion that resonated with everyone present. He spoke about the importance of equality, how every life has the same value, and the need for systemic change at the hospital. His speech was interrupted by applause and cheers, the crowd supporting him fervently. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, the directors watched with concern. Public pressure was reaching a breaking point, and they knew they could no longer ignore the situation. The protest continued for hours, and at the end of the day, Mariana announced that she had secured a live interview with a major news channel. They invited Alejandro and several of his colleagues to share their stories, exposing the injustices they had suffered and the changes they were seeking. The interview was a resounding success. Thousands of people tuned in and listened to the stories of discrimination and struggle. The public's response was overwhelming, with more people joining the cause and demanding justice. The pressure on the hospital directors became unsustainable. Finally, the hospital owner, a man known for his commitment to social justice, decided to intervene personally. He called an urgent meeting with the board and medical staff representatives. Alejandro, accompanied by Mariana and Isabel, was invited to the meeting. Upon entering the room, he felt a mix of nervousness and determination. He knew this was his chance to make a real difference. The hospital owner, Mr. Martinez, began the meeting with a serious but fair tone. "I have been closely following the situation at Central Hospital. What I have seen and heard is unacceptable. This hospital was founded on principles of equality and justice, and I cannot allow those values to be compromised." The directors tried to defend themselves, claiming they had acted according to hospital policies, but Mr. Martinez was not convinced. "Policies must change if they do not reflect our fundamental values. As of today, we will implement a complete review of our practices and procedures. Those who cannot align with these changes will need to leave their positions." The board was replaced by a new team committed to equality and justice. New policies were implemented to ensure that all patients receive the same treatment, regardless of their race, gender, or economic status. Alejandro was invited to return to the hospital, this time in a leadership position, where he could influence the necessary changes. He accepted with humility and determination, knowing that his fight had been worthwhile. Mariana continued her work as a journalist, exposing injustices and giving voice to those who could not speak. Her collaboration with Alejandro became an example of how truth and justice can prevail when people come together. The walls that had once witnessed discrimination now resonated with a new spirit of equality and compassion. Patients received quality care without prejudice, and the staff worked in an atmosphere of mutual respect. The efforts of Alejandro, Mariana, Isabel, and the community had led to real and significant change. The hospital became a beacon of hope and an example of what can be achieved when you fight for what is right. Alejandro, looking to the future, knew there was still much to do. But now he had the certainty that he was not alone. With the support of his colleagues and the community, he was ready to face any challenge and continue his mission of justice and equity in healthcare. That same afternoon, Mariana received an anonymous message with attached documents. Upon opening them, she realized they contained compelling evidence of corruption within the hospital's previous administration. There were records of bribes, embezzlement of funds, and most shockingly, explicit orders to discriminate against certain patients to favor others. Mariana quickly called Alejandro. "Alejandro, you have to see this. It's bigger than we thought." Alejandro carefully reviewed the documents. Each page revealed more details about how the previous administration had operated in the shadows, compromising the hospital's integrity and endangering the lives of many patients. "This is enough to take them to court," Alejandro said with a mix of disbelief and determination. Mariana nodded. "But we need to do it the right way. If we handle this well, not only will we achieve justice for Central Hospital, but we will also send a powerful message to all hospitals in the country." They decided to share the documents with a lawyer specializing in civil rights. The lawyer, impressed by the amount of evidence, agreed to take the case. Soon, a class action lawsuit was filed against the former hospital directors, accusing them of corruption and systematic discrimination. News of the lawsuit spread quickly. The media covered it extensively, and the public followed every development with great interest. Pressure on the former directors increased, and some began negotiating settlements to reduce their sentences. Meanwhile, at Central Hospital, the new leadership team worked tirelessly to implement the promised reforms. Alejandro, now in a position of influence, ensured that every new policy and procedure reflected the values of equality and justice. One morning, as Alejandro walked through the hospital corridors, he was approached by a young doctor who had just joined the team. "Dr. Garcia, I wanted to thank you for what you've done here. This hospital is different from any other I've worked at. It feels just." Alejandro smiled, feeling warmth in his heart. That's the goal. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. The trial against the former hospital directors became a significant event. Each testimony, each piece of evidence presented in court painted a clear picture of the corruption and discrimination that had prevailed. The defense tried to discredit the witnesses, but the evidence was overwhelming. Finally, after weeks of hearings, the judge delivered the verdict. The former directors were found guilty and sentenced to prison terms, and ordered to pay significant compensation to the victims of their discrimination. The legal victory was celebrated by the community and all those who had fought for change. But for Alejandro and his team, it was only the beginning of a new era at Central Hospital. They knew that true justice did not end with a verdict, but with the continuous implementation of fair and equitable practices. The day after the verdict, Alejandro met with the new leadership team of the hospital. Together, they reviewed the next steps to ensure that the hospital continued to be an example of equality. "This is a new beginning for all of us," Alejandro said, looking at his colleagues. "We have achieved a lot, but there is still work to be done. Let's move forward with the same determination and passion that brought us here." Mariana, who had closely followed the entire process, wrote a final article summarizing the struggles and victories of Central Hospital. The article was widely shared and read, inspiring other hospitals and communities to assess and improve their own practices. As Alejandro walked through the hospital that night, he stopped in front of a window and looked at the city lights. He knew that the path to justice was long and often difficult, but he also knew it was possible as long as there were people willing to fight for what was right. Central Hospital had been transformed, not only in its policies, but in its spirit. Every staff member, every patient who walked through its doors now knew they were in a place where equality and justice were more than words. They were a lived reality. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, Alejandro continued his work, knowing that each day was an opportunity to make a difference and that together they could build a more just and compassionate world. After the trial and sentences, the atmosphere at Central Hospital began to transform visibly. The decreasing action of the story revealed how the immediate consequences of the climax unfolded in the daily lives of the hospital and its employees. The morning after the verdict, Alejandro was in his office when Isabel entered with a radiant smile. Alejandro, the new ethics committee wants to meet with you to discuss the inclusion policies you helped formulate. They are really excited to implement them. Alejandro nodded, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. The creation of this committee had been one of his main goals, ensuring that the hospital never again fell into discriminatory practices. The committee, composed of doctors, nurses, and community members, met in a conference room. The energy in the room was palpable, with a shared sense of purpose and determination. "We want to start by reviewing the admission and treatment policies," said Anna, a young doctor who had been a vocal advocate for equality from the beginning. "We need to ensure that every patient is treated with the same level of care and respect." Alejandro and the committee worked long hours reviewing and adjusting each policy. It was not just about eliminating discrimination, but about building a culture of inclusion and mutual respect. They discussed training programs, awareness initiatives, and reporting mechanisms for any inappropriate behavior. Meanwhile, Mariana closely followed the changes at the hospital, reporting on the progress and keeping the community informed. Her articles highlighted the stories of those who had been positively affected by the new policies, showing the real impact of the change. One afternoon, while walking through the hospital corridors, Alejandro ran into Daniel, one of the patients who had suffered discrimination in the past. Daniel now smiled, surrounded by a medical team that treated him with care and dignity. "Dr. Garcia, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. This place is different now. I feel valued and cared for like never before." Daniel's words resonated deeply with Alejandro. Every effort, every struggle, had been worth it for moments like this. But he knew that the transformation of the hospital was not just a change in policies, but in the hearts and minds of those who worked there. The new leadership team, led by people committed to justice, organized a series of workshops and seminars for all staff. These events not only focused on medical training, but also on empathy, communication, and cultural understanding. Alejandro and Isabel led many of these workshops, sharing their experiences and learning along with their colleagues. In one of these workshops, a young nurse raised his hand. "I've only been here a few months, but I already see the difference. It's inspiring to see a team so dedicated to doing the right thing. But I wonder, how can we ensure that these changes last long-term?" Alejandro smiled, appreciating the nurse's genuine concern. "It's about building a culture, not just implementing rules. We must be vigilant and support each other. The key is transparency and continuous communication. There will always be challenges, but if we work together, we can overcome them." As the hospital continued to adapt to the changes, there was also an increase in staff morale. Employees felt more valued and heard, and this was reflected in the care they provided to patients. Patient satisfaction rates began to rise, and Central Hospital soon earned a positive reputation in the community. One night, Alejandro was in his office reviewing the latest progress reports when he received a call from Mariana. "Alejandro, I just received an invitation for both of us. They want us to speak at a national conference on equality in healthcare. They want us to share our experience and the changes we've achieved here." Alejandro felt a surge of pride and gratitude. This was an opportunity to show the country what could be achieved when fighting for justice and equality. They accepted the invitation, knowing that their story could inspire other hospitals to follow the same path. Preparation for the conference was intense. Alejandro and Mariana worked together to create a presentation that captured every detail of Central Hospital's journey. From the early days of struggle to the court victories and the implementation of new policies, they wanted to ensure their message was clear and powerful. On the day of the conference, the room was filled with healthcare professionals, activists, and community leaders from all over the country. Alejandro stood on the stage, looking at the crowd before he began to speak. "A few years ago, our hospital faced serious problems of discrimination and inequality. Today, we are here to tell you how, through determination, courage, and community support, we have transformed Central Hospital into an example of justice and equality in healthcare." Mariana took the microphone, sharing stories of patients and employees who had been positively impacted by the changes. Each testimony was a reminder of why this fight was so important. The audience listened attentively, many taking notes and nodding, clearly inspired. After the presentation, Several attendees approached Alejandro and Mariana, thanking them for sharing their experience and asking for advice on how they could implement similar changes in their own hospitals. Alejandro felt deep satisfaction knowing that his story was making an impact beyond the walls of Central Hospital. As the conference drew to a close, Alejandro received a call from Isabel. "Alejandro, you have to come back to the hospital. There's something you need to see." Upon arriving, Alejandro found the staff gathered in the main lobby. They had hung a large banner that read, "Thank you, Dr. Garcia, for leading with compassion and justice." The lobby was filled with smiling faces and bright eyes. Isabel approached with a smile. "This is for you, Alejandro. We wanted to show you how much we appreciate everything you've done." Alejandro felt a lump in his throat. This recognition from his colleagues was a testament to the positive impact of his efforts, but he also knew this was just the beginning. The real work was to maintain these standards and continue building on them. Central Hospital had become a symbol of what can be achieved with perseverance and a clear vision of justice. Every day, Alejandro and his team worked tirelessly to ensure this legacy endured. Central Hospital had come a long way from the dark days of discrimination and inequality. Alejandro, along with his colleagues and the community, had transformed a place of injustice into a shining example of what can be achieved with determination and an unwavering commitment to justice. But there was still much to do. The early days of spring brought a sense of renewal and hope. Alejandro was in his office reviewing progress reports when an idea began to form in his mind. He decided to call a meeting with the leadership team and some of the most committed staff members to discuss a new initiative. "We've achieved a lot, but we can't stop here," Alejandro said, his voice firm and determined. "I want to propose that Central Hospital becomes a center of excellence in training for equality and justice in healthcare. We could offer training programs and workshops not only for our staff, but also for other healthcare professionals across the country." The idea was met with enthusiasm. Everyone in the room knew how important it was to share the lessons learned and help others implement similar changes in their own settings. Thus began the project of the Central Hospital Center of Excellence in Equality in Healthcare. Over the following months, Alejandro and his team worked hard to develop the training programs. They partnered with universities, nonprofit organizations, and social justice experts to create a comprehensive curriculum that addressed all aspects of equitable care. The day of the center's inauguration was an important milestone. Healthcare leaders, activists, and professionals from all over the country gathered at the hospital to celebrate this new chapter. Alejandro gave an inspiring speech, highlighting the importance of equality and respect in every interaction with patients. "This center is not just a building," Alejandro said. "It is a continuous commitment to justice. It is a place where we will learn, grow, and work together to ensure that every person, regardless of race, gender, or economic situation, receives the care they deserve." The inauguration was a resounding success. The first workshops and training programs quickly filled up, and participants left inspired and equipped with new tools and knowledge to take to their own communities. Meanwhile, Mariana continued her work as a journalist, now focusing on how Central Hospital's Center of Excellence was positively influencing other hospitals and healthcare centers. Her reports highlighted success stories and showed the real impact of the training programs. One day, while walking through the hospital corridors, Mariana ran into Isabel. They both stopped to talk about the recent developments and how the hospital continued to grow and improve. "It's incredible to see how everything has changed," Isabel said, smiling. "I never would have imagined we could come this far, but we did. And now we're helping others do the same." "That's right," Mariana replied. Central Hospital's story is a testament to what can be achieved when people come together for a just cause. It's a lesson for all of us about the power of community and the importance of never giving up. Meanwhile, Alejandro continued working tirelessly, not only as the hospital leader but also as a mentor and guide for the new generation of doctors and nurses. One of his most promising students was Javier, a young doctor who had been deeply impacted by Alejandro's teachings and example. "Dr. Garcia, I want to thank you for everything you've done for us," Javier said one day as they walked together through the hospital. "Your example has shown me what kind of doctor I want to be. It's not just about treating diseases, but about treating people with dignity and respect." Alejandro smiled, feeling deep satisfaction. That's exactly what we're aiming for here, Javier. Medicine is not just a science. It's also an act of humanity. And you have the heart and mind to make a great difference. The impact of Central Hospital extended beyond its walls. Other hospitals and healthcare centers began adopting the policies and practices implemented by Alejandro and his team. The network of hospitals committed to equality and justice grew, creating a national movement that sought to transform healthcare at all levels. One day, while reviewing some documents in his office, Alejandro received a letter. Upon opening it, he discovered it was an invitation to speak at an international conference on equality in healthcare. The invitation came from a prestigious global health organization that had heard about the work done at Central Hospital. Alejandro accepted the invitation with humility and enthusiasm. The conference was a grand event, with healthcare professionals and community leaders from around the world gathered to share ideas and strategies. Alejandro stood on the stage, feeling the weight of responsibility but also deep gratitude for the opportunity to share his story. Our experience at Central Hospital has shown that change is possible, Alejandro said, looking at the audience with determination. With courage and an unwavering commitment to justice, we can transform our healthcare systems. It's not just about curing diseases, but about healing entire societies. Alejandro's speech was met with a standing ovation. As he left the stage, he felt a wave of hope and determination. He knew that the path to equality and justice was long and full of challenges, but he also knew that each step he took brought us a little closer to that ideal. Back at Central Hospital, life continued with its rhythm of work and dedication. The new training programs continued to attract professionals from all over the country, and the hospital became a center of innovation and excellence. Mariana, for her part, decided to write a book about Central Hospital's transformation. She interviewed Alejandro, Isabel, Javier, and many others who had been part of this journey. The book, titled Healing with Justice, became a success, inspiring readers around the world. One day, while walking through the hospital corridors, Alejandro ran into Sofia, his wife, who had accompanied and supported him every step of this journey. "Alejandro, I'm so proud of you and everything you've accomplished," Sofia said, hugging him. "You've made a real difference in so many lives." Alejandro hugged her back, feeling deep gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Sofia. Your support has been my strength in the most difficult moments." The transformation of Central Hospital was more than a change in policies and procedures. It was a transformation of hearts and minds. Every day, the staff worked with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment. Patients who had once felt fear and discrimination now felt safe and valued. One day, Alejandro received a call from Daniel, the patient who had been discriminated against in the past and who was now an active member of the hospital community. "Dr. Garcia, I wanted to tell you that I've decided to become a volunteer at the hospital. I want to help others as you helped me." Daniel's words filled Alejandro with pride and gratitude. He knew this was just one of many examples of the positive impact the change had had on people's lives. Central Hospital continued its work of healing and justice, guided by the principles that Alejandro and his team had established. Every day, new stories of compassion and care emerged, demonstrating that the fight for equality and justice is never in vain. At a leadership team meeting, Alejandro took a moment to reflect on everything they had achieved. "We've come a long way, and I'm proud of each one of you," he said, looking at his colleagues. "But our work doesn't end here. Let's keep working together, learning, and growing. Let's continue to be a beacon of hope and justice for all who need our care." Alejandro's words resonated deeply with everyone present. They knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but they also knew they were ready to face it together. Central Hospital, once a symbol of discrimination and inequality, had been transformed into a place of healing, justice, and hope. Every day, Alejandro and his team worked tirelessly to ensure that all patients received the care and respect they deserved. The story of Central Hospital is a testament to the power of community and determination. It is a lesson on the importance of fighting for what is right, even when the path is difficult. It is proof that, with courage and compassion, we can transform not only our institutions but also our societies. And so, with each passing day, Central Hospital continued writing a new story, a story of justice, equality, and hope for all. The hospital's transformation was a constant reminder that change is possible and that together we can build a better future for everyone.